Hello, welcome to the fifth video looking at the history of Arion Games. So we've already looked at the early days, the paper miniatures, the taking on of the Maelstrom license, the forays into print via AFF and via the Maelstrom and Maelstrom Doomsday lines. But there's more to Arion Games than just those lines. They're the ones we're best known for. They're our bestsellers by a fair way. But they're not the only games we produce. And there are two sort of strands of less well-known games. One of those is the games based on Savage Worlds, which I'm going to talk about in a couple of days' time. But we have got some other smaller games. So, for example, we have Vikinga. We have Sorcerer Turek. And we have Humanish. I'll talk about Humanish first. So Humanish is a mixed supernatural game. Vampires, werewolves, ghosts, zombies, etc. as the player characters. And you're probably thinking, oh, well, that's quite familiar. Well, it is. But back when I wrote this, you know what? I can't even remember the year of it. Back when I wrote this, 2015, that's 10 years ago, there weren't that many games that covered this type of setup. Now, obviously, there was the vampire, werewolf, mage, etc. line. And it has a big following. Of course it does. It's one of the big games out there. But I was reading through some of the vampire books I had, and I have to admit I couldn't make head nor tail of the rules. Added to which, there was a lot of meta lore about the game. So this clan and this history and so on and so forth. I didn't really want any of that. If I ever ran that sort of game, what I wanted was the rules to provide for those sort of characters. And then I wanted to create my own setting, my own stories. So all of the meta stuff was fairly relevant. And on top of that, if you wanted to play a mixed supernatural game, you needed about 8 different core books. And there were also some balance issues between them, as I understand it. So although it is understandably a great game and you know, very popular, it wasn't for me. What I wanted was something much simpler. I wanted a game where you could play all of the supernatural types in one game with no meta background and so on. So what I did was I took the old Marvel superheroes that was essentially free to use, and I put that into this system, because when you come down to it, your supernaturals of this sort are really just minor superheroes. And so some fantastic art done, and you can see you've got all the different types of undead in one book, and it's sold reasonably well. We did a small Kickstarter for it, just about funded. It sold reasonably well. It's never sold in massive numbers because it's not that well known, but it works really, really, really well. And really what it does is it underpins the reason why I write many of the games that I do write, especially the smaller ones. I write them because I want to play that game. And there's nothing already out there that really suits my style and so on. And of course, we've got to remember, everyone is individual. Many people will think Humanish 2 rules light, not got enough meat on it to play a supernatural game. That's fine, because for some people they prefer a more rules intensive game. Some people prefer a lighter game. And that, of course, is the beauty of modern RPG industry, is that you've got small publishers producing very specific games, producing very open games, etc. You've got all sorts of games, and whatever type of game you want, it is out there. Of course, if it isn't out there, I then write it because I want to play it. And that brings us to the other sort of strand of our smaller games, which is Sorcerer Turek and Vikinga. Now, they are different games, but they're both based on the West End Games D6 system. So that became open license, etc. So I was able to use it. And Sorcerers of Turok came about because I wanted to run an Ars Magica type game. So I wanted to run one where characters had a wizard, they had another major character, some minor characters, etc. And I've got quite a few Ars Magica books. But my group, and I suspect there's quite a few people out there in the same boat as me, my group, get them to turn up on time on game night, and we play all remote. So get them to turn up on time for game night is something of a challenge. Getting them to put in work between sessions, I would say, is pretty much impossible. It's not going to happen. And Ars Magica, incredibly fine game though it is, requires quite a lot of homework, a lot of working out lab totals and experience totals and so on in between sessions. And there is not a chance that my group would go for that. And indeed, even last year, I pitched an Ars Magica game, and the response was, nah, too much work, too much. So it wasn't going to happen. So Sorcerers of Turok, again, I'm trying to remember the year, 2015 as well. Obviously a good year for extra games. Sorcerers of Turok came out of that. So we've got the flexible magic system of Ars Magica, sort of. We've got the different types of character, the major character, the servant, the soldier, the specialist. But obviously, doing medieval Europe, I could have done, but obviously it would have overlapped far too much with Doomsday. So I wanted to do something a bit different, and I thought, you know what? I've been reading a lot of the Conan books, Conan the Barbarian books at this time. That'll work really well. And so you've got a Persian, Sumerian-ish, sword and sorcery-ish setting. So you've got the ancient temples out in the desert with the forgotten spider gods. You've got the cultists. You've got strange big beasts. You've got a specific backstory, which is that humans were enslaved by a long vanished race, and they escaped, and the artifacts created by this long vanished race, although they're not magical in the sense of a magical sword or a wand of fireballs or a ring of invisibility, the artifacts contain magical power, and mages gain experience by taking these, researching them and deconstructing them. So we've got the backstory. So we did the book, and the book was mostly illustrated by a family friend who's a watercolor artist. And for the sword and sorcery type setting, the sort of somewhat washed out watercolors work really well. And we did a city guide and so on, looking at different factions. And that has proven relatively popular. I started writing a series of adventures for it. Unfortunately, didn't quite get as far as I should have done with that. But then a few years later, wrote Vikinga. And again, I wanted to play a Viking game. And I've got 2 or 3 Viking games that are very good. But to play those would involve me teaching my group new rule sets. So on the shelf down there somewhere, I've got Yggdrasil from Cubicle 7, which is obviously a translation of a very popular French game. And I really liked reading it, but I knew that trying to teach my group new rules, I would end up with a bit of, another new rule set, etc., etc. So we went for the D6, went for Vikinga. And this is, again, based on D6, because D6 obviously is a very adaptable game, and it's been adapted to Mini 6 and all the rest of it. And there are, I believe there are some new versions out and so forth. But it works really well. And again, whereas Sorcerer of Turok is a specific game, like Maelstrom Doomsday, you are these wizards, you go adventuring into the forgotten layers of this dead race to find artifacts to bring back, to deconstruct, etc. That's what you do in Turok. And you get involved in city politics and factions. Vikinga is not. It's a book for playing Viking games. It's more like AFF. It's more like Humanish. In this, you are Vikings. Now, there's rules in there for pillaging. There's rules in there for various types of Viking magic, prophecies, and so on. But of course, you could play a straight Viking game with it, a historical game. You could play fantasy Vikings. You could play semi-mythical Vikings, etc. There's rules in there for shield walls, so you can do the smaller mass battles. There's rules in there for runes and so on. So you can use this as a toolkit to build the Viking game you want. And again, art is very important. You've seen the art for Humanish, it really works. You've seen the art for Turek, that really works. For Vikinga, we turn to one of the artists I've worked with a lot with AFF, which is John Capsalis, and he did some awesome art, which really, really, I think, fits the feel of this book. And so these smaller lines here, in a way, are a bit like the homebrew games that many, 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 many people write. Except rather than writing this homebrew, printing it out, running some games with it and putting it on a shelf and forgetting about it, these ones became published. And I think that's a really interesting thing about the intersection between my own gaming and Arion Games. Because back then, when I first started 20 years ago, Arion Games was a way to make a little bit of money, and it did. But now, obviously, it makes more money because a lot more products. But now I find myself, when I think about a new game I'm going to run for my group, my brain is almost immediately pivoting to how do I get this published so that other people can play it? And that has actually, if you like, infected the rest of the group. So one of the other members of my gaming group is the person who wrote Adventure Creator. Now, he's been running an AFF, not in Titan. It's a fantasy version, but it's in another world. And there's some slight adaptations of the rules and different character ancestors and all sorts. And we were playing it, and I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? This would make a really good powered by AFF book. So not Advanced Fighting Fantasy on Titan, like all the other ones are, but a good powered by AFF book with some modifications to the rules, setting, adventures, etc. And I was doodling some notes about it over the course of a couple of weeks. And then the GM said to me, you know what? He said, I've been thinking, we ought to write this up as a book and publish it. And I was thinking exactly the same thing. And so, in a way, Arion Games is very much a reflection of my own gaming, of my own games. Reflection of me. Of course it is. It with a creative business like that, it has to be. So that has very much shaped how we've gone forward. So I've got a couple more videos to do. One is going to look at the Savage Worlds books, and one is going to look at the original AFF and see how that compares to what we eventually published. So hopefully you found that interesting, and until next time, thank you very much.